So thank you, Dan, for the kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope technology will pick up on me because I would like to use a couple of slides. They will come. So we've heard a lot about the study. Luigi introduced it quite heavily when he spoke. Still, I feel that there are facts and figures that would help us guide the discussion and frame the debate, and maybe also, try to help us distinguish what's important from what's less important, and what will make a difference for the investment that we all want to see happening. So let me jump right into it. Is this European technology? All right. So if I had to pick two words to describe the state of Europe, then I would say it's lower and slower. So if you look at the left-hand side, what you see is obviously the lowest ARPUs in the developed world, significantly lower than to other regions. So this is one element. The other element is, of course, that if you talk about performance and you measure it in speed, broadband obviously is something that caters to speed. Then we see that, again, we're far behind, and this has been stated a couple of times tonight, but I think that we're very, very far behind in terms of deploying the right broadband technologies to serve our consumers. So why is that? So you look at this slide, and this basically looks at mobile as one element of the investment area. Obviously, there is a lot more investment going into fixed, but the pattern is the same. Luigi said it, 2% decline overall, but if you look at the mobile investment, you can clearly see how we're lagging in terms of investing into 4G and how we're lagging in terms of deploying that capacity against this market. So again, why aren't the investments there? So we're all looking for that magic answer. How can we get investments to get into this industry? We've tried to figure out obviously you do a lot of analysis and you figure out that the ROI is insufficient, the cash earned is insufficient. Yes, there's been some returns to shareholders, but why is that? Because shareholders think that it's better to get the money out of these industries rather than keep it in those industries. Otherwise, they wouldn't ask to be paid out, quite obviously. So the sector, however, is creating value in Europe. Look at essentially where has value been created. It's not in the networks. It is in digital services, it is in devices. 200 billion have been created there over the last years, while network owners at the same time lost 40 billion in valuation. So the value is massively shifting from one part of the industry to other parts of the industry. So there must be some imbalance there. Shareholders are not keen to put money into network players. Consumers are not willing, able, allowed to pay more. EU governments won't step in at this point in time where we are in Europe to invest in infrastructure. So where is the money supposed to come from? And this is basically the main theme of where we looked into the study to say what could be the main interventions that we will have to look at to steer investments, to bring investments to the European industry. Again, maybe what's the objective? What do we want to achieve? Well, we said digital agenda is something that we'd like to achieve because digital agenda, connecting households to high-speed broadband, is a key element of driving growth and welfare in Europe. And we set very specific targets for 2020, what we want to achieve by then. And if we look at those numbers and the projections where we will end based on the current investment levels, we clearly see that we will fail, we will miss the targets by 50%. 100 million households not able to connect to that sort of broadband if we continue the path that we have. On the other hand, we made an estimate what's missing. What's missing is 170 billion. Sounds a lot. If you compare it with some of the numbers that we heard earlier, maybe it's not a lot. I think Apple's got it in the bank. So, it is a lot of money, but it will only come if we have the right conditions for investment. So we believe it requires a fundamental change in the approach that we've taken so far. Piecemeal will not do. So let me take you very briefly through the interventions that we think are key. So 5 key interventions that will lift unnecessary regulatory burden, 5 key interventions that will finally transition the telco sector to a market being fully driven by market forces, 5 key interventions that will benefit consumers and investors alike and help Europe catch up, but as you will see, 5 key interventions that need a more holistic approach than what we've seen so far. The first one, deregulation of fixed wholesale. We have to acknowledge that the markets are not where they were 20 years ago. Essentially, broadband competition needs to be seen as a technology agnostic thing. Whether consumers get XDSL, FTTX, cable, LTE, it doesn't matter to them, and essentially it shouldn't matter to anybody else either. You know, it's there in many areas. If we do this, we could basically reduce fixed regulation widely across Europe. Believe me, if we would do that, it would make network investments more attractive than renting them. Then essentially we would see a massive amount of investment going into that. And by the way, in some of the European markets, with lowering those barriers, we've already seen a big movement and a big commitment of the industry doing that. Secondly, healthy concentration. In telco, technological advancement and scale are the main drivers for lower cost and lower prices. Merger assessment today does not take that into account to the degree necessary. So we call this dynamic efficiencies. If you want a market with 3 credible, you would prefer a market with 3 credible players over a market with 4 to 5 laggards, I think it's quite obviously what you would take. But today, we're having difficulties to move even in any given market in mobile into that sort of configuration, and we see a lot of challenges on and a lot of remedies being asked from players if they want to go that path. Thirdly, it's been said a number of times, I had debates with my native English-speaking colleagues about OTT level playing field. I've heard it a number of times today, so apparently it's working. Network operators are clearly in a competitive disadvantage today because depending on where you originate, differences in taxation, differences in consumer rights, in data protection, are handled in different ways and putting clearly network operators from Europe into disadvantage. On the other hand, fair use policies and tiered pricing must not be seen as acts of discrimination, to just cater to different usage patterns. So creating a fair competitive environment, protecting the European consumer and boost homemade innovation could drive value back to European players. Fourth, spectrum. Thank you, Randall, for taking that up. I think it is clearly a big issue in Europe. Each of the 28 member states does its own thing. Different auction rules, maximizing proceeds from the auctions, every now and then sponsoring new entrants, where consolidation actually would be the better thing to do. All that hurts network investments and led to a time lag of 8 years between the first country running into LTE investments in the auctions and the last one that will probably be sometime in 2016. Clearly, that needs to change. A harmonized approach that creates optimal conditions for fast LTE, and of course the next generations of mobile technologies will be coming soon, and again, spectrum will be key to deploy those. Fifth, if we harmonize, we can also harmonize the rules and procedures in how we do business in terms of consumer protection, in terms of all kind of local provisions on how to do business. Today, in Europe, it is very hard to create cross-country synergies. We've got a number of people in the room who are operating in 10, 14, 17 countries, and they have a tremendous hard time to get synergies between two countries, even if they are neighboring, if they use the same language. It's very tiny what you can do, and in all honesty, it will not make a big difference if we don't change those rules and procedures. So going for the single market may be a good second step, but harmonization of rules and procedures needs to be the first step, because otherwise we're doing the second step before the first step. We took the liberty to look into what the Commission has proposed so far, and we have to say, let's give credit where credit is due. We also believe and share the opinion that the Commission has put a tremendous effort in reform of the regulation to realize the digital single market in Europe. If you look at the slide, obviously you see that we're not happy with all of the points, and that has been also said before, but let me be a bit more specific here. In most of the points, we feel that the Commission doesn't go far enough. One close enough to the action would maybe even say stuff that has been distributed earlier or has leaked was already doing more justice to the problem. So essentially we see that the political mills have watered down some of it, and it's unfortunate. In some areas we would even say the suggestions are extremely good. Harmonization of spectrum, I think we've got that one. Recognizing that fair use policies and tiered pricing schemes must be allowed. And we believe that the move in fixed wholesale regulation points into the right direction, but just does not go far enough in what needs to happen. And when it comes to consolidation, obviously we're a bit disappointed, because we don't believe that the single market concept will change the way competition authorities will define markets. So we might get through the sour, but I don't think we will get to the sweet there, not the way it's been defined now. More specifically, when it comes to putting this roaming aside, there is a danger that the way it has been defined, we could create a Europe-wide free rider model in mobile that could put a lot more burden on the industry that has already been put on it. Roaming in itself, yes, it's 6 to 7 billion, may not be seen as the big issue, but by the way, it's not a big issue for consumers either, because the average European consumer gets 13 euro cents per month less on their bill. Just think about that. Most people out there aren't business people like us. They're using their mobile phones for 2 weeks when they're traveling. And typically, again, sorry to say that, but when they go to the US, that bill hurts. It's not the one that happens in Europe, because we've already gone pretty far on that. So, we've also done some numbers on what can be achieved. And we believe the stakes are high. I already said 170 billion of investment is needed. Because this industry is the backbone of so many other digital transformations in other industries, obviously it has a lot bigger impact on GDP. We estimate that it's 750 billion of growth by 2020 that this industry could capture and would not capture if that investment is not happening. And that, again, is equaling 5.5 million jobs badly needed given the current unemployment in some of the European countries. Europe has pretty much lost out in devices, in software, and in digital services, also said before by other speakers. And remember, that's where the value shifted to. And we believe that we have to turn this trend according to our study, and it is possible to turn this trend. It may require a concerted effort of all stakeholders. I like that one, closing the doors, spending the rest of the afternoon figuring out the solutions, because people to do that are in the room. And I hope that that's why we're here today, to start a debate to improve the current proposals and move towards a digital agenda for Europe. So let's act boldly together. Thank you very much.